thanks for joining us. This webinar is we've got attendees joining us from all over the globe: New Zealand, East Coast Australia, Adelaide, Perth, and even some early risers in the UK and Ireland. We'll move along, and if Andrew, if you can hear us and join in, jump in at any time. So the question relating to our presentation today is, why is school marketing different? And we're going to take a little bit of a different tack on that one. But before we do, just a couple of quick housekeeping. As I said, my name's Brad Entwistle. Andrew Sculthorpe was the chipmunk that you could hear a little bit earlier. But you can write questions in the chat pane of the GoToWebinar control panel at any time and we'll answer the questions at the end. We'll be recording the webinar, and you can email a copy to you afterwards. So first, a very quick little introduction to Image 7. Many of you know us through either personal contact or our e-newsletters, the SMC, School Marketing Communication Newsletter and Podcast. But I'm talking to you today from Sydney, and we've also got a team in Brisbane and the service hub in Perth, and more recently, welcome to our new Ireland and UK office. And so we essentially cover the globe from those locations. All in all, we've been in school marketing for 24 years in one way or another. So we've seen the whole marketing, face of marketing in schools change dramatically in that time. The team around the globe is essentially 23 of us, and as I said before, that service hub, there's about half the team is in Perth. And while it's probably sounds a little bit grandiose, but Image 7 is globally recognised for its expertise. And I was just thinking last night that exactly 12 months ago, I was in the US for the International Boys School Coalition, presenting to 3 days of conference there. So that's a little bit about Image 7. But if you guessed what we look like, well, that's what we look like. 2 men and a microphone. This is what happens on lunch hour when you employ design creatives. Little photos like this creep out into the world. So that's Andrew or Scully on the left, and that's me on the right. So the title of today's podcast is why school marketing is different. But that begs the question, different to what? Well, I want to start off by saying, to be really honest, marketing and education are often not good friends. In fact, often they don't really play together very well in the schoolyard at all. The educationalist view of marketing is that it's a waste of resources very often, and it could be better spent on improving educational outcomes. Marketers, on the other hand, are prone to blow a fuse when asked to deliver a steady stream of quality enrolments with resources that are a fraction of our commercial cousins. So you, as the marketing leader, end up squarely between a rock and a hard place, and it doesn't have to be this way. So firstly, let's be clear about the reason for marketing your school. The long-term success in all aspects of a school is dependent solely on sufficient intake of quality students at an acceptable cost of acquisition. That's the cold hard truth. You're not going to achieve your mission as a school unless you've got backsides sitting on the seats. So with that benchmark set, and we can lift our eyes, so to speak, survey the educational marketing landscape, and we say, why is it different to our commercial cousins? Well, we're talking about it's different to retailers. We're not commercial marketers. We're not consumer marketers. Schools are very different to that. And today we're going to hear a dozen pretty quick reasons why they're not. At the end of this, we're going to ask you 4 questions. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to answer them. If you don't, you'll be able to work on them and be able to answer them. Part of the reason of today is to be able to give you the tools to be able to talk to your school leader, whether it be a school head or somebody that's responsible for the marketing function, and be able to give solid reasons why you don't want to be falling into the consumer marketing trap. So we believe that schools have been working with the wrong marketing model. And it's not because they're trying to do anything wrong, it's just quite simply that there hasn't been another one given to them. Education marketing is not consumer marketing. So reason number one, there's our lovely 1960s staff room set.
Hello, Brad.
And Scully, you've joined us.
Now let's hope. I apologise for heaven only knows what happens. Best laid plans, but hopefully this is loud and clear for you. So I just see if we can pick up where we were. So reason number one. That's a charming image you've produced there, Brad.
Absolutely, and might I say, I'm younger than that. This isn't my school, but school marketing begins on the inside, and hence our picture of the ladies there, the educationalists on the inside. In education marketing, lots and lots of people from within the school, and usually not the marketing people, will interact with parents and the community. They're your customer. All of those people need to understand the brand and live the school brand and deliver that brand every day. So the job of education marketing and communication is to first market internally and to align the team and create brand ambassadors. Now, through here, you'll hear a groan from Scully as I mentioned Pepsi, because Pepsi is always my example of consumer marketing. Pepsi don't have to worry about internal alignment. They don't worry about what the man on the production line or the person in the office or the lady on the sales team need to do. They don't worry about what they're saying to the end consumer. In fact, they'll never even interact with the end consumer. So that's reason number one why school marketing is different. Reason number two is that your school's brand is important. And I put that photo in there because that's got to be the epitome of a bland brand. School on a red brick wall. School brands...
You're not using the brand word on us, Brad, already?
too quickly, I'm afraid. But brands are important in schools. Now, some people don't think they are, but that's because they're thinking in the wrong model. School brands, they aren't always well known outside of their market, and that's absolutely fine. But they are extremely important to your education purchase decision makers, otherwise known as parents. And it still remains absolutely very true that practical criteria drive the selection of a school. So there you can think of things like, geographic location, price and performance. But the weighting that education buyers put on a school brand drives and completes that actual purchase decision. So it's what others think of you. What is that market thinking of you? So in school marketing, your brand is critically important. The questions there that the parents, the purchase decision makers are talking about in their own head is, can I believe this college? Can I trust them? Will the school deliver on what they promise? Most important of all, can I trust my child with these people? Scully.
Well, it's a hugely important point, and of course, branding. So some people say, "Oh, my school's not a brand." Oh, yes, it is. Whether you like it or not, it's what people perceive of it. So, in terms of hello,
a little sidebar there, very quickly. Brand is not a logo. I just thought I'd make that point, and I'll get off my soapbox and move on. So, reason number three: education products and services are usually very complex things. So education, they're sophisticated. What you're selling in a school is a sophisticated and complex beast. Lots of the real benefits and even some of the potential shortcomings. They're not obvious to the buyers. They don't know how to interpret it. If I'm going into a lunch bar and I'm buying my can of Pepsi, I know how to judge it. I can judge it on its price, and I can judge whether it's cold or not, or indeed whether it's in date if you're travelling in the wild woods of some developing country. It's very important to look at the date. But parents don't know that when they're buying school education. So education, marketing, communication, you've got to take the technical, the subtle and the intricate and make it clear, understandable and absolutely persuasive.
Now, point number 4, Brad. What have you teed up for us this time? Education markets have long purchase cycles.
The picture of Scully as a baby.
Similar hairstyle.
Not really. Yeah, the education purchase decision cycle is absolutely longer, and particularly in independent schools. And quite frankly, the higher the school fees, the tuition fees, the longer the purchase decision cycle is likely to be. It wasn't that long ago I was sitting in a meeting where we were talking about tactics for dealing with people who were registering their child for 2020. So decision cycle can be from several months to several years or more. The problem is we don't always see it when it's starting. And marketing to these purchase decision makers, education purchase decision makers, requires a different approach to consumer marketing. And you've got to take into account what stage of the buying cycle your prospect is in. Pepsi don't have to do that. All they've got to do is get me when I'm thirsty.
How many Pepsi mentions is that? And I assure you, we're not sponsored by Pepsi. But reason number 5, moving swiftly on, is your education selling proposition. It's complex. It's much more complicated than so many other buying decisions are because the offering is so different. Is that right?
Indeed. We were just talking about it before, but the education selling proposition, it's a sophisticated offer. So you've got to present value-based differentiated solutions that support rational buying decisions. Now, I'll get out. So let's stick on those words: value-based and differentiated solutions. In other words, my picture of the balloons there, gimmicks can get you attention, but gimmicks won't sway the purchase decision. Great for making the place colourful and getting attention, but don't rely on giving away a balloon to make the purchase. So the complex differences in schools, they've got to be articulated and the messages delivered through really well conceived and compelling communication strategies.
There's a beautiful family, Brad. Now, next point, number 6. There are fewer education buyers. Now, you could say there's thousands and thousands of families out there, so isn't it easy to just hit them all? It's a numbers game.
Well, that is one approach, but that's the consumer marketing approach. Potential buyers of education products, if you like, your school, they're difficult to identify and they are expensive to reach. There's only a small market for your school in the end. From the entire population, you've got to find out and then engage with who the parents are who have a need for education. In other words, they've got children of a school age, they've got to desire what your school offers, they've got to be geographically in the right place, and of course they've got to be financially able to pay whatever your fee structure is. And that's just the first set of filters. If you're a faith-based school, then that requires parents to support the beliefs or the ethos of the school. So while there's fewer out there, they're also make it much easier to target. Indeed, just recently I've been talking with some schools where on the first pass we think it's quite feasible that we could be creating a list of who the actual people, when I'm talking list, I'm talking name and addresses of who the prospects are. So consumer marketing relies on hitting lots of people. Education marketing is entirely different. We only want to hit those few buyers who are actually in the market.
Now, reason number 7. Now, buying a can of Pepsi is most definitely not an emotional decision for me, but education, that is an emotional decision. What do you reckon?
Absolutely, and Scully, I know you've just been through it, looking at senior schools. So it's not rational. Now, that would seem to contradict what I said a few moments ago about you've got to create rational arguments. But rational arguments will normally be used to support emotional decisions. So basically, dig a little deeper through the rational and you'll find the emotional connections that are connected with social aspirations and community values. And I mean, at its core, a parent just wanting to do the best they can for their child. And that's emotional stuff. It's really heart-wrenching. So don't ignore the emotional decision about it. As much as I do like my Pepsi, it's still not a terribly emotional decision for me. Maybe it's emotional when I can't buy it and I can only buy Coke.
Never more the case, hey? Your prospective parents do their research or do more research.
Yeah, well, the risk of making a bad decision is pretty high for education buyers. And think about it. You go back to my Pepsi. If I pull the can out and I opened it up and I didn't like the taste of Pepsi, I've wasted a couple of dollars. Low threshold, low risk. Get it wrong when you're choosing a school, and that's a really high risk. You're damaging your child for life. So the answer for prospective parents is in research, and they do far more research than what our commercial cousins enjoy with consumer marketing. So Forrester Research, in fact, has shown that more than 90% of purchase decisions, complex purchase decisions like schools, begins online. But buyers will usually also seek the opinion leaders in their orbit. They'll evaluate references. They'll hug statistics, and of course, we all know that from the league tables of final exam results. But it's also important to understand that they don't do all of that work, all of that research just for themselves. That they do it because often they also need to sell their decision internally with other members of the family, or sometimes the student, certainly husband or wife or partner, and it's more and more frequent these days, indeed, where grandparents are making financial contributions to education, that they've got to be sold as well. So prospective parents do far more research than our consumer cousins.
Now, data, however it's said, school marketers have less research data available than who?
Well, go back to our example of Pepsi, although, of course, I don't think you'd find Pepsi in it's the snacks aisle we've got there. But you won't find Pepsi there, but you would find Unilever there or Nestle. They don't put a product on the shelf unless they've spent millions and millions of dollars on research, and they've tested it and tested it until they're blue in the face. They've got a pretty good idea that something is going to be successful before they go to global release. Very few schools enjoy the luxury of having those sorts of research budgets. In fact, I've yet to meet any that have got those sorts of luxuries. So many aspects of your product, what you're selling, your school, they're prescribed. They're the same for your competition down the road as well. So, so that's an equalizer. So this makes success, that inability to do tests, the inability to know that something's going to work before you put it in place, it makes success a lot more dependent on the experience and savvy of the educational marketer in the seat. And well, that's our listeners today.
Now, people by people, what do you think? Education deals with more people in the process than most.
I visited a school this morning, and I was just counting it on my fingers, so to speak, but there's certainly usually more than one person influencing an education purchase decision, and often there's many. Education marketers have got to identify and then reach multiple people across different centres of influence, and that often means tailoring different messages to resonate with individuals' interests. So a fairly classic one, Scully, you're the sports nut, I'm not, but you're the dad who the rugby or football results of a school will mean something to you, and they won't to me. So that's a good example of needing to tailor messages to suit different people. Our consumer-facing cousins don't have that problem. They're creating anybody with a thirst. They're the market for Pepsi.
You mean not everyone's a sports nut?
I know. Take a glass of water, Bex, have a lie down, but it's true.
Oh, okay, if you say so. Now, number 11, personal contacts make education sales. We're on to people again.
Absolutely. Education marketing usually doesn't happen through, well, highly crafted communications like television commercials and things like that. It's one-to-one customer relationship building through personal interactions. That all of that absolutely does demand sophisticated sales management. We would call it enrolments team, but who are knowledgeable and they're trained and whose words and actions are absolutely aligned with the school brand. But in the end, marketing doesn't create sales. Marketing creates demand. People make sales. People make the sale, not a strategy, not a brochure, not a website. People make sales. People are critical at the thin end of the funnel.
And finally, reason number 12, outsiders have a significant influence in education purchase decisions.
Education purchasers, they will often look outside their immediate connections to third-party influences. So they want their opinion, their insight, or referrals. Don't, however, discount the most powerful marketing tool at your disposal, which I know everybody today will know, and that's word of mouth. A positive or reassuring word from an opinion leader is worth its weight in gold. Now, the thing for in contrast to consumer marketing is, I've made my mind up, do I like Pepsi, do I not? Well, I do. I drink Pepsi in preference to Coke, but that's as deep as the decision goes. I don't ask anybody with, what do you think of Pepsi, should I like it or not? It's my decision. Whereas in school marketing, outsiders have got an inordinate amount of influence in the purchase decision. People will rarely make such a decision without making lots of questions along the way. So with that, I hope that those 12 really quick reasons why education marketing is different has given everybody a taste of how to think differently, how to have a new model of thinking about school marketing and communications. Now, right at the beginning, I mentioned that there's 4 questions coming up. So here's the 4 questions. We'll scoot through them quickly, but fear not, you can download these and we'll give you the web address in just a moment. But I want to quickly talk to each question. The first question is, what specific outcomes do I need from my marketing communication? And by that, I mean, write down on a piece of paper that I need to have 20 new students in the Year 7 intake next year. I need to stop students leaving, or halve the number of students leaving. Put numbers around it. Be firm. What are those specific outcomes? If you don't know those specific outcomes, then your marketing communication is going to be aiming at almost anything. The next one is then think about your current structure, what you've got, the expertise that's available to you across the school, and the resources. Now, resources is not just money; it's time, and it's we've worked with schools that have got a rickety old mono photocopier, and we've got client schools that have got full-on colour print rooms. They're all resources. So think about the structure, expertise, and the resources. Is it realistic? Is it realistic to imagine that you can match those goals that you've set for yourself? Question 3, can I clearly articulate what the brand of my school is? And I'm not looking for a yes/no answer there. What I'm looking for is to be able to write it down. And can I clearly say, the brand of my school, it is, and within less than 100 words, be able to describe what your school brand is. If you can't, then you're always going to have trouble selling the school because you can't describe it. And last question to be looking at is, can I differentiate my school from the direct competition? And if so, how? Differentiation is very important. People want to know why they're buying the school. What's the value that you're going to deliver to me that somebody else can't deliver? And with that, Scully, I will hand to you to handle questions.
Yes, well, indeed. Thank you so much, Brad. And there are a couple of questions here. One, a real world question. This all sounds very expensive. How can I do it on a small budget? And yes. Well, I think the answer to that is you can tailor your communication to the budget that you have. Quite frankly, I think a lot of money gets wasted on, let's call it, some of the old media solutions, pumping out to very, very broad audiences information that then there's a lot of wastage. So it's about working within what you have. In fact, I would challenge people that these days money can be saved or spent more efficiently, is the phrase to put it, because it's not a mass media. It's about communicating to the audience that you have. So it's not as intimidating as it need to be at all. What do you think on the money side of things, Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. This scales like consumer marketing, and I can afford a small ad or I can afford a large ad. That's a scaling. This scales in exactly the same way. It's put a fancy term around it. It's the allowable cost of acquisition, which means just basically how much money can I spend to get an enrolment. Mm-hmm. And if we're targeting down and targeting on fewer people, then we can actually afford to spend more people on those few, more money on those few people. So absolutely important question, very valid and critical question, but it's just not an either or. I think it is one of those both questions.
And another question, how do I sell this to my headmaster? Simple, you just invite Brad or I to come along with you. Alternatively, the great news now is this is much more a science than an art, or even a dark art that people may have seen it before. It's not just a hit and hope with various marketing exercises. Let's throw some information out and hope. Things are so measurable, and with a sound strategy behind it. Put the strategy first, and show a clear sort of path forward. It's easy to articulate where you are and where you'd like to be, but I would say it needs to be structured like that. It's a case of educating your principal or headmaster and to come on board and see where you are and measure the progress along the way. Brad, anything on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose, and recognising that we've got a number of school heads with us today, but the truth is that there is very few school marketers out there, very, very few school marketers, school heads out there who are marketers, who have been trained in marketing. And really turning this around it's our responsibility as school marketers to engage with our heads and educate them about what is different, why you want to do the strategy that you're going to undertake, and it is about selling. So hopefully the information today is useful in selling why what you do is important, and why what you want to do in your strategy and tactical terms is important and critical for the school. But you've got to get in there and engage with the school head, the decision maker. So often over the years, I've just seen people with responsibility for school marketing sit back and go, they just don't understand. They won't sign off on anything. Well, that's all of our job, to build up the confidence that they have in us, take them by the hand and lead them through the process.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, we've just got another question. Just as I was about to wrap up, another question's just arrived. How do you change the minds of teachers to commit to the brand when they think it's a fluffy addition to the real work that they do?
Very good question. And that's a question that goes to the heart of changing a culture. And that's why, with the internal alignment that we talked right back at the very beginning about, that's what that's all about. And it's about getting the brand being articulated as something that the educationalist can believe in. And so I'm not using that word loosely, but they do have to believe in it. And it's got to be seen as coming from the top. Very, very hard to change that sort of culture unless it, quite frankly, the marketer stands there in front of an all-of-staff meeting and the principal or even board chairman is standing right along next to them and going, ladies and gentlemen, this is us. This is the brand. This is what we're going to the world with. It is us. And if it's not us, we've got to live up to it and change to be this brand really pronto, because the brand is really what we promise to the world, what they think of us, and our ability to live up to that brand and promise.
It is.
I'm
indeed.
going to stop there, Scully, because otherwise I'm going to...
No, I agree. And just one on a really practical level there, as well as in position from the top, or I think the process can be hugely important in that, by inclusion of members of the staff, representatives of the broader team in the process, in articulating what the school or college is about, and getting people on board, and including members of the team throughout that process. Then that's a great way to use that to get the buy-in. So on that note, thank you all so much for listening. It brings it to a close, and I just a little bit of housekeeping in terms of look out for an email, because the recording of this webinar, including perhaps my chipmunk voice, will be coming your way together with an ebook. If you can't wait for the email, you can log on to www.image7.com.au/webinar resources to get the information instead, or as well, so you can share that with your colleagues or just refresh your memory. So I'm sure you'll have heaps of questions to process all this information. So we'd like to offer you all a 20-minute consultation. So if you log on to that webinar resources page that I just mentioned, that's www.image7.com.au/webinar resources, and register for that consultation. Brad and or I will be very, very happy to talk through specifics about your school, your organization. Also on that resources page, you can sign up to receive our weekly school marketing e-newsletter and subscribe to our fortnightly podcast to hear more of Brad and my dulcet tones. And you can pick up an ebook for Is It Time for Your School's Marketing Health Check as well, which I think you'll find very useful, flowing on from the information you've just heard. So that resources page again, www.image7.com.au/webinar resources. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.